organization from Germany.
Because Comrade Max is not feeling well, I will take his position now. So, but I will read the speech and not having like a free speech. But yes, I hope it's okay. Dear comrades, the Communist Organization is very pleased to be able to participate in the Platform Conference as guest for the first time. In our speech, we want to reflect on the developments of the international communist movement from the perspective of our own development. We are looking forward to exchanging ideas with you on this more intensively. Our small and young organization was founded in 2018 with the aim of initiating and organizing a communist clarification process. What do we mean by that? We have recognized that the communist movement in Germany and, in essence, worldwide is in a deep crisis, despite some large and influential parties. The manifestations of this crisis are still evident until today. The communist movement is fragmented, often isolated from the working class. Knowledge of the worldwide history of the labor movement and knowledge of scientific communism lie buried. Neither could we identify a comprehensive understanding of the defeat of socialism, nor a revolutionary strategy for the class struggles of our times in the communist movement in Germany and internationally. But we ourselves are also not in the position to do so. We understand now the central cause of the crisis to be revisionism, in other words, the influence and penetration of bourgeois ideology into scientific socialism. On this basis, theories and strategies were able to grow that led the workers' movement as a whole away from a revolutionary line in the epochal struggle against capitalism. The influence of modern revisionism, anti-Stalinism, the dissolution and abandonment of positions of the centrally planned economy, the party of new type, the dictatorship of the proletariat, the influence of Eurocommunism and much more could be seen in the German communist movement. At the beginning of our development, we were particularly interested in the KKK, the Communist Party of Greece. We recognized many of the elements that were associated with the project of communist clarification process in their efforts to re-establish the meeting of communist worker and workers' parties after 1990, the analysis of the defeat of real socialism, the struggle against the influences of Eurocommunism, the establishment of the European Initiative and the Communist Review, their newspaper. We look with interest in the practical successes of the KKK in building power and its continuing historically grown roots in the Greek people. From our point of view, the initiative for debate, for sharp but open confrontation within worldwide movement was right, and the only way to identify and combat the basis of the movement's crisis. It is all the more tragic that this tendency was aborted. Long before the start of Russia's special military operation, one of the KKK's most central concerns with the international communist movement was to assert that China was socialist and not socialist, and that the emergent imperialist pole was being organized around China and Russia. The open debate has increasingly been replaced by a demarcation and rallying around a supposedly revolutionary pole and the defamation of the majority of communist parties as revisionist. With the beginning of the special military operation, the harmful effect of the idea of the imperialist pyramid and the KKK's position that the communists would rally behind a new rising imperialist pole, instead of independently putting the socialist revolution on the agenda, became recognizably in its dangerous implications. This line of equidistance leads to disorientation and makes a consistent political struggle against NATO more difficult, even if the actions of the KKK and Kama against the arms deliveries and NATO bases must not be overlooked and remain important contributions. Their analysis of the role of China and Russia are one-sided, distorted and misleading. By de facto equating these countries with imperialism, they not only exaggerate the West, but also create a dangerously false image of China and its character in particular. The understanding of imperialism as a whole has been gutted by claiming that there are no longer any qualitative differences between the countries in which monopoly capitalist conditions prevail. There would be no oppressing and no oppressed countries, but only a quantitative difference in the share of globally organized exploitation and relapse into the capitalism of free competition. The essentials of the theory of imperialism were eliminated by them. In our organizations, these events led to sharp disputes and finally to a split, with part of the organization joining the supposedly revolutionary and radical slogans and lines of the Kukuē. In the context of this split, we have not only recognized the harmful effect of the imperialist conception of the Kukuē and other parties, but in particular realized that the gathering around a supposedly revolutionary pole dissolves the good and correct impulses by Kukuē into a divisive tendency for the international movement. For example, instead of carrying out the necessary and interesting debate between the Kukuē and the Russian Communist and Workers' Party on the question of exported fascism, openly and controversial in the public sphere of the movement, it was ended by Kukuē. Instead of using the international meeting of the Communist and Workers' Parties for exchange and sharp discussions in order to develop the movement as a whole, an attempt was made to polarize the parties with statements. The European initiative of the Communist and Workers' Parties was unilaterally and without consultation declared, dissolved by the Kukuē. We see here a development in which the Kukuē, which originally played a leading role in promoting exchange and discussion within the communist movement by setting up, for example, SolidNet, is now obstructing exchange and development at a global level. We ask ourselves how this change of course in the Kukuē could come about. It formulates an ideological and political claim to leadership that is not in a position to fulfill. However, comrades, we want to emphasize that we are striving for a joint discussion with all parts of the communist movement, and especially also with parties like Kukuē. We need open and controversial discussions for development and clarification. Sharp criticism and probing questions are necessary, but they need not and should not lead to the termination of talks and possible joint actions on the basis of common positions. We must fully recognize the problems and contradictions within the worldwide communist movement and must not close our eyes to shortcomings of our own. Harmful and wrong political position of communist parties do not at the same time mean that they can be understood as rebellious as a whole. A simplistic labeling can hinder an understanding of the contradictory and complicated situation and historical development of communist forces. We recognize this problem especially within the communist movement in Germany and in our own development as an organization. So, we see that the discussion initiated by the platform are very important and can provide strong impulses for the communist movement. The main thrust of progressive forces and oppressed peoples worldwide must be directed against the US-led NATO, which is waging war against Russia and preparing for war against China. The sharply outlined plans of the class struggle are rapidly forming worldwide. The heroic resistance of the Palestinian people clearly demonstrates increasing isolation and at the same time completely unrestrained aggressiveness of imperialism. The struggle for socialism is part of these struggles, part of the struggles against imperialist oppression and for national liberation. Only in the midst of and through these struggles we will be able to build the revolutionary workers' movement. The need for international organization is put on the agenda quite practically and strongly by the struggles themselves. We do not need a loose context for discussion, but increasingly binding and politically ununified that the link to the discussions and developments of the International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties is indispensable. Although we are entering a more dynamic phase of the international class struggle, the crisis of the worldwide communist movement will not simply be resolved or ended. The revolutionary lines and forces of the workers' movement will only be able to assert themselves through sharp but open debates with and within the global movement. This requires intensive work to strengthen scientific communism in our ranks. A new international will not easily emerge alongside and apart from the historically grown parties of the movement. In many of them there are debates and disputes that we must not simply ignore, even maybe in parties like the KKUE. Many of them play an important role in the political struggles. Many of them contain the historical experiences of our struggles. We believe that there might be a danger in writing off these forces that have come together in SolidNet, for example, which we would like to discuss further with you and on which we want to improve our exchange. Many debates and questions have recently become clearer regarding the understanding of anti-imperialism and the connection between national liberation and class struggles. The ambivalence, limitation and contradictions on the role of the BRICS, the limitation of bourgeois ideas on multipolarity, and also the need for a comprehensive and historically concrete analysis of the balance of power, as exemplified by the complicated situations of the communists in Venezuela, for example. In Germany, we recognize a dangerous tendency to view the dependence of German imperialism on the USA in an absolute and one-sided way. Progressive positions on national liberation are carelessly transferred to the situation of an imperialist country with far-reaching implications for a policy of alliance with chauvinistic and fascist forces. We will have to exchange and discuss all these questions further and much more precisely within the communist movement and very gladly also concretely in the platform. Dear comrades, in Germany we are currently confronted by one of the biggest waves of repression in the country's recent history. With Russia's special military operation and additionally intensified since the heroic resistance of October 7th, basic rights are being massively undermined. Describing the war against Gaza as genocide is forbidden in public. Agreement with Israel's so-called right to exist is made a precondition for pro-Palestine protests and possibly even a prerequisite for asylum applications and German citizenship. The Palestine Prisoner Solidarity Organization, Samidun, was banned on the basis of absurd arguments. It is the domestic political facet of an imperialist state at the forefront of the war that is striking at the workers' movement in Germany. Germany's capacity for the war is to be increased at breakneck speed, military capacity is built up, the population steered up and any opposition nipped in the bud. Under the umbrella of NATO, West German imperialism seeks to secure and expand its dominance in Europe, to carry out economic transformation processes on the back of the working class, and to take military leadership on NATO's eastern flank. German fascism is being rehabilitated. In the context of the war against Russia, Nazi admirers are being celebrated. A disgusting victim-perpetrator reversal of the Second World War is being pursued and mixed with anti-Russian hatred. The forces that adhere to a consistent anti-imperialist course are few and far behind in Germany. For decades, pro-Zionist forces have worked to bring trade unions and the left in general onto a pro-imperialist course, not only in the question of Palestine. With the beginning of Russia's special operation, established and organized forces, such as the Social Liberal Left Party, have fully embraced the course of NATO. Nevertheless, resistance is stirring among the working population. Large demonstrations against the genocide in Gaza and protests against the war against Russia have taken place despite media incitement and repression. In many cases, these political struggles are organized and politically diffuse. A political force interwoven and connected with the working class and deeply rooted in scientific communism and proletarian internationalism has yet to be built. We see our role in contribute to this task, which we would also like to tackle in a joint process with you and the international communist movement. Long live international solidarity!